Hey there everyone, I'm NBC 15 Chief Meteorologist Thomas Geboy. I'm joined today by somebody who doesn't really need an introduction along the Gulf Coast. Alan Seals. How are you doing today, Alan?
Doing fine. Enjoying our humidity with no active weather.
Okay, so for those of you along the Gulf Coast, you know Chief Meteorologist for quite some time.
Yeah.
But Alan, you've also done a lot of other things within the weather enterprise, and even though you're now retired, that doesn't mean that you're not doing anything. I know that you're the president-elect of the AMS.
Right.
Could you kind of talk about what that is?
Yeah, so the AMS, American Meteorological Society, we are members of it. It is an organization of over 12,000 meteorologists or people who are in related professions like hydrology, climatology. It is mostly members from the United States, whether they are in government, for example, NOAA, whether they are in academia, whether they are professors or researchers, National Weather Service, and then of course private industry, and TV counts as private industry. So it's all about weather, and our mission statement is about improving meteorology for the benefit of society.
Okay, and then being the president-elect,
yeah.
What are your roles and responsibilities when it comes to that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, within the organization, we have lots of, we call them subsectors. I was just at a conference on fire weather. I was at a conference on polar meteorology. All these little things that you never really think about what a meteorologist might study. So we, number one, support our membership. That's the key. Support them as human beings. We support them as professionals, and we try to gather the best minds, the best information to build information that helps all of us as professionals, and then of course that helps us help the public.
Okay, and then being the president of the AMS, I'd probably argue nobody has a better insight of our industry as a whole.
Yeah.
And as you know, there have been a lot of changes within our industry within the last couple of years, most notably within the federal government.
Right.
So kind of what are your overall thoughts on all the changes recently?
Too many changes, too fast. Life is all about change, and you have to have change in life. But the change we want is managed change. We want change where we are contributing and controlling the outcome as much as you can. And what we're seeing, particularly this year, coming from the White House, Office of Management and Budget, is proposals to dramatically reduce the funding to science, whether it's the National Science Foundation, reduce the budget of NOAA, reduce the budget to FEMA. It's all sorts of things that relate to the ability for us as human beings to live on Earth with safe environments that are also productive to things like fisheries. NOAA, for example, is not just the National Weather Service. NOAA is National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So NOAA is very highly involved with the Gulf, Mobile Bay, our fishing industry, our shrimping industry, the oyster industry. It's all about the environment, the Earth, and how it relates to us. But of course, we know it mostly as weather.
And then being the president of the AMS, and you've been to a lot of conferences recently, of course, being the president, what are you hearing from the folks within NOAA and more specifically from the National Weather Service?
I'm hearing, unfortunately, sadness and dismay. We as scientists invest a lot into our careers. It's something we do as passion, not for profit. So a lot of people are just distraught and dismayed. And I'm not just talking about people who had their jobs taken away from them. That happens in all industries. But I'm talking about people who have dedicated their lives to studying a particular topic to contribute to the bigger picture, and of course to help society, help the environment. And these are anywhere from researchers to actual weather service forecasters, people who directly impact their local communities. Even, for example, a couple of NOAA, at least one NOAA Hurricane Hunter is out of his position. Now, we still have the Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter, but bit by bit, there are so many things that are pulled away and proposed to be taken away. It weakens the science of meteorology, the other sciences as well, but especially meteorology.
Okay, and then we've seen recently that there are not as many balloon launches happening on a regular basis. So we send up these weather balloons, they take a reading of the atmosphere, and those get put into forecast models.
Yeah.
kind of what are your thoughts on maybe losing some of that data and the effects that it could have on forecast models going down the line?
Right. You never want to lose data. That's the bottom line. Even if you're traveling and you've got your GPS going, and all of a sudden you hit a blackout, you're like, oh, where am I? How am I on time? Am I going to get to where I'm going? And with less data, something like GPS is less accurate. So we need data. That is one of NOAA's primary missions: collecting data. Satellite, which looks down on the clouds on the Earth; radar, which looks for precipitation but also gives you the rotation of a potential tornado. Radar can see smoke plumes from a wildfire, just like satellite can see hot spots. Weather balloons, weather stations at different airports. So that's really NOAA's primary job: collecting that information, using research to figure out how it comes together, how to model it so that it can be forecasted, which makes our lives safer and easier. With the weather balloon issue right now, nationally, we're down about 10% of the number of weather balloons we would typically send up. So far, I don't think anyone could say for sure that we have lost quality in the models, but it's kind of impossible to take away data and then assume you can get as good of an outcome as you would if you had more data. So those are the real big concerns: data, research funding, all of those cuts. For example, this year, I'm optimistic that we're not going to see any dramatic changes in the overall forecasting for the United States, which of course includes hurricanes. And don't be distracted when you hear Gulf of America. If a person is a NOAA employee, they have to use that label, Gulf of America. We, of course, call it the Gulf.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone around here has called it the Gulf forever, and it's just the easy way to call it what it is, because that's what we've always called it. We're very fortunate. We know a lot of folks that work with the National Weather Service, and they're highly skilled professionals. They are excellent at what they do. We have the hurricane season coming up. That's the main topic of why we wanted to bring you in today. Just as we go throughout this hurricane season with all these changes, number one, what are your thoughts on it? And then maybe what we've seen within the staffing of the National Weather Service, of maybe what you're hearing behind the scenes.
Right. So the answer to your first question, even as just a citizen, hurricane season, take it week by week, day by day. Long range outlooks give you a little trivia, but there's no long range outlook that can tell us whether we are going to get hit by a hurricane, or two hurricanes, or three hurricanes, or none at all. So keep up with that forecast on a daily basis. In the bigger picture, the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service are partner agencies. They're both under NOAA. Fortunately, from what I've seen, the National Hurricane Center has not had dramatic cuts, as far as I know. But the problem in all of this goes back to what we said initially. Week by week, we're hearing different things coming from the federal government. And even my colleagues, our colleagues in the Weather Service and in NOAA, they don't know. They literally don't know what is coming other than change. And it's change that one of the discussion points a lot of them bring up is the folks who actually do the work of forecasting, of hurricane analyzing. They don't have a lot of input in how the structural change of the Hurricane Center or the Weather Service is going to be.
Yeah, well, and we've talked beforehand about the National Weather Service and their staffing. On a normal day-to-day, you probably won't notice too much of a change within the National Weather Service, but it comes on the days where we have significant weather.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that's showing up a lot now in media is that some National Weather Service offices are understaffed, some are severely understaffed, some have no management right now. So Houston, Texas, for example, Lake Charles, Louisiana, severely understaffed without the full suite of managers that they need. And I think just like any other company or agency, you can run on a normal pattern without managers. But when you need equipment, if you need staffing, if you run into a weather crisis or a long-term weather event like Hurricane Sally, where it's days and days of trying to cover something, that's where you need those managers to step in and help guide where you're going. Locally, from what I hear, our Weather Service offices are in good shape. The Mobile, Pensacola office in good shape. Although it also has been understaffed for over a decade. So again, it's the things that go on behind the scenes that people don't realize what it all takes to keep us updated with the watches, the warnings, the forecast cone that comes from the National Hurricane Center. I'm optimistic again that this year we won't see any big changes, but if Houston gets hit by a major storm and Lake Charles, not too far apart, other Weather Service offices are going to have to literally contribute bodies, contribute energy, contribute time, and that's where things could start weakening in terms of the ability for every Weather Service office to handle their local area as best as they can.
Okay, and then going back to the data issues, as we talked about, not really expecting too many changes as we go throughout this year, which I think is just good news for everybody at home, because hurricane forecasting and just tropical forecasting has gotten so much better within the last 20 years. The cone for Katrina is not something that you would see now.
Yeah, in fact, Katrina's cone, where it touched the coast, let's say if you were to take the 3-day mark, that cone was twice as wide at 3 days as it would be now. So every year the cone gets better, and it gets better because of data, research, and experience. So this is one of the problems that we meteorologists as a community see, is a lot of folks within NOAA who took early retirement. There's your experience. So we have lost a generation potentially of folks who have firsthand experience with Camille and Frederick and all these historic storms that play into predicting future storms.
Okay, so we've talked at length about the National Weather Service, but I also just on a daily basis throughout the hurricane season, if you just go on social media, we're now to the point of the year where you probably don't have to look very far to see a forecast model that is more than a couple of weeks down the line. There's a lot of bad information out there. So I was wondering if you could kind of touch on that a little bit.
There's a lot of bad information, and there is information overload. And sometimes the overload just by itself psychologically is bad, because you're constantly bombarded by information. And even if it's good, you always have to step back and say, okay, can we really forecast where a hurricane is going to be 10 days from now? And the answer is no. We can't forecast where a hurricane will be 10 days from now. On social media, though, if you have 100 people guessing and making graphics, maybe 5 or 10 of them will get lucky and their guess will be correct. And then by perception, oh, well, this person's right. They got that storm right. But they didn't get it right because of knowledge and data and the science of meteorology. They got it right because they took a guess and they were lucky.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, think before you share.
Yeah, most importantly. And also don't forget that there is so much now on social media that is intentionally designed to fool you, whether it's someone who's a hobbyist meteorologist who makes images that look a lot like the National Hurricane Center graphic. So if you're just scrolling through your feed and you see that image, you're like, oh, and then you step back and realize it's not the forecast from the National Hurricane Center.
Well, and the algorithms that social media companies have might play a role in that too.
Oh, they definitely play a role in it. Anything that the algorithm can figure out by the rate that you scroll, by what you pause, especially by what you share and comment on, you're going to get more and more of that. So it's sort of a monster that perpetuates itself. So don't look at things that really bother you and scare you, because you're going to keep seeing those things over and over.
Okay, and to go along with some of the misinformation, disinformation, and everything that's circulating around, AI is quite prevalent, and it's not like it used to be where a hurricane comes through and you see the shark swimming down the interstate that pops up every single storm. Some of these images you have to actually think about being real or not.
Right, and even with that, for someone who's not a meteorologist and a photographer, even there you're still not sure, because AI is based on real things, but it merges them together in ways that sometimes are not scientifically possible. But generally, here are my clues for people. If you see an image and it doesn't have the person's name on it who took the picture, you have to be kind of cautious about it. If you see an image that's really scary about a storm and it doesn't say where or when it was taken, that's another sign that it may not be a real image. But typically, when a person records an image of weather disasters, they're going to put their name, the location, and especially the time of when it was all taken.
Okay, well, that's the things to be on the lookout for, at least social media wise.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to talk about being hurricane season coming up, especially along our stretch of the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
And you worked in this market for quite a while.
25 years, yeah.
And there's no doubt that you've seen a lot of change in this area. And I think a lot of that change stems from how many people have moved to this area.
Right.
What advice would you have for the folks at home who maybe haven't gone through a hurricane season before as we lead up to the hurricane season ramping up?
Yeah. Talk to the old timers. That's my advice. I'm an old timer, and an old timer is really anyone who has been here for a few decades who can give you a firsthand account of how each storm was different. And not just Sally, but you go back to Ivan, Katrina, even Hurricane Dennis, which a lot of people don't remember, but more importantly, Frederick and Camille, storms that they set a benchmark for their impact on our area. With all hurricane's a big storm, but the threats are distributed in different parts of that hurricane. So you can't just look at it as one big thing coming at you. You have to stop and think, okay, am I in, first of all, a storm surge zone? Because that's one of the main effects for an incoming storm, water pushed on shore. Then, if you're not in a storm surge zone, everybody's in a flood zone. I don't care where you live, you can flood from a hurricane, especially one like Sally that just slows down. And that's a key message because Sally was not as much of a wind threat. Well, it was on the coast, but it was a flooding threat because of how slowly it moved. And then the other half of it is, if you've never gone through a hurricane, you look at the categories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know 5 is the big bad wind, but a 1 can be big and bad in terms of tornadoes, in terms of flooding, in terms of storm surge, any one of those or any combination of those. So it's really, every hurricane is it has its own personality. You just don't know what it's going to do until it gets there. And that means you've got to be prepared for the worst storm there ever could be. And then when it's done, you should say, I was lucky. Instead of saying, they were wrong, because the forecasts are rarely wrong. It just cannot be specific to your house or your neighborhood.
Yeah, well, and it's not just hurricanes for those that aren't from this area. They're not just coastal things. And I think last year proved that was the case.
Yeah, fortunately, we didn't have a direct hit. Florida was hit, and then Georgia, and then South Carolina, and then North Carolina. And that, of course, was Hurricane Helene. A flooding storm, a windstorm into the Carolinas, into Tennessee, tremendous loss of life, tens and tens of billions of dollars of damage away from the coast. So it is not just something at the beach. You look at historic storms like Camille that went up the Appalachians into New England and caused record flooding and tremendous loss of life there. So it is not just at the beach, at the coast, it is potentially everywhere in that path. And now we're learning, here's where research and data comes into play, a lot of our loss of life from hurricanes on the Gulf Coast is not from necessarily the wind or the storm surge, it's the heat that follows the storm, because you lose electricity and we are not acclimated to being in a hot, humid environment, unlike our great-great-great-grandparents. So people end up dealing with heat stress, heart attacks, and then older folks who are on medications have to deal with the fact that heat impacts how the medication changes your body. So there's a lot to a hurricane other than expecting it to be wind that comes in and then it's gone. Way more than that.
Well, and we've had examples locally of inland areas being impacted, like the northwestern part of our area during Zeta, as it more or less skirted our area, and then even Atmore as well.
Right, winds, both of those locations, the inland counties up toward Highway 84, winds of 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, so don't underestimate.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought up the points of the data and from the National Weather Service, but when it comes to preparing for hurricanes and not necessarily being prepared for the aftermath of a storm, because I remember after Katrina, don't have power for days. And it's not like it was now where everyone had a smartphone. So I felt like we were even still a little bit better to be prepared for after the storm. But now we lose power, we lose AC, but we also lose potentially cell service. So
Yeah.
just the importance of preparing for storms before they come.
And you will probably also lose internet, whether it's Wi-Fi or the internet you're getting through your cell phone signal. So we are such a society so sensitive to small changes in our atmosphere and in our surroundings. And if we do, not if, when we do see another Camille or Frederick or Ivan or Katrina, it will come as a shock to people how much you cannot do. We're so used to pressing buttons and things work, but when you get back to a hurricane, that's where you meet your neighbors. So good advice now. If you don't know your neighbors, you'd better get to know them, because after a bad storm, everybody comes together. Everybody has to come together to share resources, whether literally it's water or the food that's about to spoil, or a chainsaw or a gasoline for the chainsaw. So community, talk to your neighbors who have been through storms in the past, and they can kind of give you a better sense of what you may have to deal with. But most importantly is be prepared. I don't think any of us expect to be in a car accident. They happen every day, and every year tens of thousands of, I sound like an attorney, tens of thousands of people lose their lives in car accidents. But if you're planned for it by wearing a seatbelt, most of the time you'll be fine. I can testify to that personally. But if you're not planning for hurricane season, you're driving without a seatbelt.
Yeah, and I've heard you say time and time again, we prepare for the worst and we hope for the best.
That's right.
And so what other tips and advice would you have for people who maybe haven't gone through a hurricane season before? What do they need to do as we ramp up to the hurricane season?
It's what you need to do, which is harder than ever because of the economic situation a lot of people are in. In the old days, you would have had a battery-powered radio, a battery-powered TV, and even though a lot of people may not know this, you can get a digital, portable, battery-powered TV, so that when you do get that hurricane or you lose power for any other reason, you can still watch TV on a portable digital TV. So I would recommend investing in that. Some people say, oh, I'll just watch it on my cell phone. If you lose your cell signal, you're not watching anything. If you lose your internet, you're not watching anything. If your cell phone dies, the battery runs out, you're not watching anything. So to that end, now you've got to get a solar-powered backup, solar panels, or a portable solar charging device for your devices. And then the standard rules of, you can buy bottled water. Now, I'm old school. I have empty jugs at home. And if there's a storm coming, I just fill them up. And then if I don't use them, I just water the plants. But be prepared for these things that we take for granted. Clean water, electricity. Those two things alone are going to mess you up if you lose them. My wife teases me, but I still keep a rotating stock of canned goods. Even though you may not be excited to eat canned food, if you get a hurricane where the stores are closed or your credit card doesn't work because all the systems are down, you'll be happy to eat what you can get. So basic stuff like that, canned foods, flashlights other than your cell phone, because you don't want to wear out that battery just to use a flashlight when you can have a portable flashlight that stands alone. So tons of tips of things you can do. And again, a lot of it comes down to talking to people who have gone through it in the past and giving you their experience.
Okay, well, we've talked about a lot of things in this conversation. I was wondering if there are any things that we touched on that you might want to add to what we already discussed.
I would say hurricane season is like really preparing for anything else in life. The cliche, as we just said, plan for the worst, hope for the best. You have to do whatever you can do. Don't assume that nothing bad is going to happen. And most importantly, I guess on a daily basis, once you take away social media, whether you're getting your forecasts on your weather app from Thomas Geboy, you want to check that forecast. It's updated at least 4 times a day. And our weather changes to the point where if the morning forecast, if we get something big that happens in the morning, it means the afternoon forecast is going to shift one way or the other. And everybody has to keep up with that specifically. You can't just use yesterday's forecast to plan for tomorrow, because every forecast basically has an expiration date of about 6 to 8 hours.
Yeah. Well, Alan, I want to thank you for being here today.
Happy to be back. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of folks know that you retired from doing TV weather, but you have a lot of other things going on, as we talked about at the beginning of this year, the
Right.
AMS president-elect, but what else do you have going on?
Yeah, so I'm staying in Mobile, still live here. This is home. Still teaching one class every spring at the University of South Alabama, Introduction to Broadcast Meteorology. Along with that, every other week I write a weather column for Lagniappe newspaper. I am also doing weather consulting, whether it's local weather or weather elsewhere in the country. A lot of interesting cases from hurricanes to ice storms. Along with that, I'm the yard man. I get to cut the grass and feel the humidity and get out and look at the sky. So I am certainly staying busy.
Okay, well, Alan, thanks again for coming in. I really appreciate your time.
You are welcome.
Thank you.